That means that I have everything from severely profound to gifted together, which is always fun. I teach every subject. So I teach ELA. We teach 2 hours of ELA. Then we teach about 90 minutes of math. Then we take a break from life, and then we do writing in the afternoon, and then science and social studies. So I have literally every subject. One thing that I like about what I do or how we teach our kids is that our instruction is very hands-on, and every day is different. I can't say that I grab this lesson plan from last year and I can use it this year, or that I can repeat any lesson, or that it's going to go the same, because literally every day is different. Every day is an adventure. And we like to keep it fun and interesting for the kids because they are very different in their nature as well. So I would say that those are my highlights in essence. Those are the things that I enjoy about my job, which comes with many challenges.
We will definitely get into those challenges in a minute. Okay, so other teachers, secondary, you teach middle school. Go ahead and say anything you want to say. Just give yourself a nice introduction.
Hi, my name is Gina Montcrief, and I teach middle school at Lawton Childs Middle School. I am currently teaching 6th grade math. I am teaching 6th grade GEMS, and if you're not sure what the GEMS is, it's the gifted program for the math. These students are 2 levels up from the average math student. They will be taking Algebra 1 and Geometry before they leave the middle school, and they will start high school with Honors Algebra 2. With what Paula's sister said about it being different every day, it is different every single day, and my students challenge me daily. These kids think outside of the box. I swear they go home at night on Google and look up things to come back the next day and ask me, well, what if we do it this way? Or how about this? Can I try it this way instead? But they are always, always thinking. So that's my big challenge with them is yes, I teach them tons of concepts, but I love when someone comes up with a different concept or something that is totally outside of the box. And I can give you one very quick example, solving equations. I had a little boy who could not solve them. We have tears in 6th grade because these are the kids who are math proficient, have never had to study for math. They are just excel. He could not understand equations, so we had tears. He went home. Somehow in his mind, he clicked that if he would go ahead and look at the variables as zombies and the numbers as people, and he would put the zombies and the people on opposite sides of the equal sign, he could solve equations. But it was his own process, and I just love that with my kids when they come up with something that is just completely different, but it makes logical sense to them.
I love that. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's start off. You guys both said something pretty positive. Let's do something challenging you've had to face then through your teaching career, because you guys have been teaching for definitely longer than your first year. How many years have you been teaching? Have you always been teaching the same subject or the same grade? And what was a challenge that you've had to face? So let's start with Tanya again, except she's frozen. So we'll give her a minute. I do love that face that it's frozen on though. I'm gonna take a picture of that. All right, looks like she's still frozen, so why don't we just go back to you again, Miss Montcrief?
Am I still on? Okay, there we go. Whoops, I can't hear you. Okay. So I started teaching in 1991. I taught 2 years at Memorial Middle School in Orange County. Then I transferred to Lake Howell High School and taught for 7 years. Then I stayed home for 15 years when my girls were born. And then I went back to school, and I've been teaching at Lawton Childs Middle for 7 years now. When I did go back, I had the opportunity of only going back part-time, so I only teach 4 classes a day, and they are all GEMS this year. What else did you say? Oh, something challenging. I guess if you want to, not inside the classroom, but as far as teacher responsibilities outside the classroom. So something challenging is just the incredible amount of paperwork that middle school has compared to like a high school teacher. We reflect on everything. We are the middle school who gets to try all of the new things. We're doing our FSA field test this Friday for writing for the 6th grade. Even though these kids have been doing FSA since they've been in 3rd grade, we get to host a field test for them this Friday. So I lose a whole day of teaching because we are the middle school that Seminole County likes to have try everything. What else did you want me to talk about?
So since Tanya's not back yet, most of the teachers who are in here besides Paula and I are primary. So you get a lot of the primary students when they come into like 6th grade. So how has that worked? What kind of concepts do you think they're learning? Do you think they're prepared after having come from primary to come into 6th grade math? How's that going? I know you have most of the GEMS and gifted, but how do you perceive that at your school? How ready do these kids come from primary to move to middle school? And what do you think some of the primary teachers or future teachers here could try and focus on with their kids in order to better prepare them?
For the kids that we get, so my kids have taken prime usually as a 4th grade and a 5th grade student. They come in here with very, very strong math skills. They can add, subtract, multiply, and divide, fractions, decimals, and whole numbers. If I would have to say anything for a primary math teacher, stress those fractions, stress those word problems. Those are ones, they see those and they just go skip and they keep on going, because they would rather not have to deal with those. For Lawton Childs, we do pull from some great elementary schools around us. They are very well prepared when they come to us. My kids usually score 1st or 2nd in the county for the standardized 9 weeks exams that are given to us by the county. So I feel that our elementary schools are doing a fantastic job in preparing our kids.
Well, that's positive for y'all. Oh, Tanya's back. Awesome. Can you hear me?
All right, I'm back.
Awesome. Okay. So what we were going to ask you was, how long have you been teaching? Have you always been teaching what you're teaching now? And a challenge you've had to face during your year.
So I've had many challenges, and the first thing that I taught in my life was not elementary, was not primary, it was secondary. It was 7th and 8th grade, and I taught English as a second language. That was very interesting, not just because of the challenges of teaching, but because of the community that I was teaching at. It was a very low socioeconomic neighborhood. Kids didn't have any big aspirations. It was just, you could be the drug dealer in the corner, or you could be a hairstylist or a trucker. Those were your main choices there. So not a lot of aspirations. So they didn't see the need, because they didn't have big aspirations, of learning. So what was the purpose of learning? There was no purpose at all. So in that specific environment, that was the biggest challenge, is how to get them motivated to want to learn, to want to be something better than they were, when really, they didn't aspire to much. Where I am now, it's a different set of challenges. It's the challenge to be able to differentiate and really access, every kid's toolbox and give them the best of their toolbox, and find their unique ways to communicate, or their unique ways to learn and actually make academic gains, which can be a struggle for many of the students. And in an environment that it's inclusive, then that turns into a challenge in itself, because you have this really high students that you have to cater to as well, and you have this really low group of students that you also have to challenge to come on. So I think finding that sweet spot in between what's obtainable and what's achievable and pushing higher than that, and wanting them to get higher than that. Because as they get older and as they realize that they're different, or that there's differences, or that sometimes they can't get to the answer as fast as the other one, then most of them, or a lot of them, can get frustrated easily. So not dealing with it is not an option. So you have to really tackle that state of mind and that growth mindset, and just really embed that in. Maybe you can't do it yet, but you'll get there, that sort of thing. I think those have been like my biggest challenges, that and handling, like the behaviors that come with the frustration and all those things.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So a lot of us as aspiring educators come into education with a lot of preconceptions about what it is like to be a teacher. So I guess from your perspective, what was a preconception you had before entering the profession, and what was something you realized that you think is really important, or something that was surprising that you think was really important for us to know about? So something surprising about the education profession that you did not think you'd ever encounter. So let's go to Tanya. Let's just go Tanya again.
Okay. So one thing that I think that most people don't think about is cultivating relationship with parents, and how important those are. How important is the way that you refer to a student. Also establishing those relationship with those students, even if they're little. Sometimes you think, well, they're just little, so, that's not a thing. But earning that trust, that, that sense of security and of safety in the classroom, that lets them know, hey, this is who I am, and I'm here for you, right? Teaching really doesn't come naturally to everyone. And I was blessed in a way, because funny enough, although I didn't go to school to become a teacher, I became a teacher afterwards. When I was little, that's all I wanted to become. That's what I wanted to do. And I ended up here teaching anyways. But you don't think about, well, this is my stage, and this is who I teach, and I have all these little minds that I have to deal with and that I have to teach. How can I establish a truthful and honest relationship with every single one of them? And how can I also earn the respect of their parents and the trust of their parents? I think those were things that they don't necessarily teach you, and they don't necessarily talk about a lot. I know that when I went to get my alternate certification, it was more on the content and making relationships with parents, yes, but more towards the lines of, opening communication lines and that sort of thing. But establishing that relationship and letting them know that you really understand them as parents, and that you're not targeting their kid, and that you're there for them too, I think that's really important.
Okay, and then a secondary teacher.
I guess a lot of the misconceptions when I first started teaching, because I taught the 2 years in the middle school, and I taught at Memorial Middle School, which is right down from the 33rd Street Jail. So I went in there thinking that all of my students had great parent support, because I was always there with my girls. And you will be surprised at what some of your students deal with in their home lives, and how that comes back and affects what's happening just in their day. So that part, I was really shocked at what you know, a 6th grade or 7th grade student is dealing with, and it's just their home life. We had last year at our school alone, we had 5 students who lost either a mother or a father during the school year. We just recently had a little girl who tried to kill herself. And just, I did not think of those things as going in as a teacher. I went in thinking, wow, you know, I know all my content. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to teach math. They're going to love it. I'm going to make sure they know it. But as a teacher, you have to wear so many different hats, and you have to make sure, or they ask you to, you know, make sure of how is your child, how are the students doing? Is there something going on in their life? Is there, you know, what's going on the outside? So you're a psychologist, you're, you know, you're a teacher, you're there in case they need somebody. It's just a lot of different shoes or different hats that you are wearing as you're teaching, besides just teaching them your content for the day.
Very deep, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think that is something that our generation especially is starting to realize, especially with the prevalence of school shootings. So there are a lot more problems that our kids are facing than we are probably prepared to deal with. So let's move on to something a little more positive. I would like to know any sort of technique or skill or resource you think we should pay attention to or should know before becoming teachers. So is there anything you think would help us in our first year that either you used or that you would recommend to a first year teacher? So let's go back to Tanya.
There we go. iPad bit me. Resources. I guess it's not as much as a resource, but to know your community, to know your people, to know where they come from, to really get to know your students and that socioeconomic status or that situation at home, or because that is a big deal. Sometimes getting involved in the community, visiting around. You can read a lot, but reading honestly won't do as much as really seeing things firsthand. So really getting involved in your school, really getting involved in the students' lives. I think that's that's the best advice that I could give a first year teacher. See, you'll always find ways to teach content. Teachers pay teachers, not a great solution. But you'll always find creative ways to teach what you have to teach. It's getting involved with what the real needs are behind what you're teaching. So common sense, right? Common sense is not that common. So teaching to that common sense, how do you teach common sense to a kid, right? How do you teach them what life is like? Making your content and making whatever you teach not just be math, but applicable life skills. Thinking three-dimensional, thinking through your lesson and not just making it a concept but a true experience. Think about what you would have liked to see. Sometimes that helps. You go like, well, I wish I would have known this when I was, younger, and thinking, okay, so how can I make this fun, engaging, and still get to what I need to get? We sometimes get too focused in the fact that we have to grade them and that we have to have some sort of work and that we have to show what they're working for, but there's more than one way. There's always more than one way. How can I make this truly meaningful? I think that would be the thing. So thinking, okay, so look at your everyday life, look at where they come from, look at what they do, look at what, where their families come from, look at what they have to go through. How can I make this that I'm teaching meaningful to them? And you'll only know that if you're getting into it, like getting into their communities and spending time with those families. I think that's the best way to do it. think that's the way that makes sense to me, and that's the way that I was taught too. So, you know.
Thank you so much. All right, secondary teacher.
I totally agree with what she was saying about being involved with your school. The kids love it. If you show up to a basketball game, a track meet, something like that, that just lets them know that you are not just their teacher in the classroom, but you also care about what they're doing on the outside activities. I always get to know at least something about every single one of my students as far as what they do outside, if they play sports, if they dance, if they do gymnastics, karate, whatever they do. And then that way I can always just say, hey, how was the football game that night? Or how did track go? Something like that. The more you can bring technology into the classroom, they're going to definitely, in different ways to bring technology in would be a big thing for a first year teacher. And then the other thing I can say as a first year teacher is rely on your COL. For middle school and high school, you have COLs, which are your math department or your English department will all meet together, and they will plan, and you will plan activities, and you will share different things that you guys have. Rely on that COL a lot because they're there to help you. They're there to make sure that you are successful your first year.
I think primary schools also do those types of things too, so that is definitely helpful. I would say one more question before I let everyone else just ask anything they want to. Something else that a lot of aspiring educators are very unsure about is discipline and discipline techniques, and how many referrals are too many? What are you allowed to do in a classroom in relation to discipline, and what works and what doesn't work? Because we have heard horror stories from first year teachers where kids are just perfectly aware these teachers do not know how to control their classroom, and all the punishments they dish out are never going to be carried through. So what kind of discipline ideas do you have? What kind of discipline techniques do you carry out that actually work? What's something you want to share with us about discipline in the classroom? So Tanya.
In my room, I have a clear set of expectations. I am a stern teacher in that sense. I do a lot of whole brain teaching. My kids know what the expectation is when they come in through the door. They know what the expectation is to line up. They know that I'm not playing around, and they know that I mean business. I always think of my classroom as a stage, right? If you can play this convincing character, then the more you play it, the more they believe it, kind of thing. So I do a lot of, okay, so I'm being stern right now, but I'm gonna give you a hug now, or I'm gonna, kind of just show both ways. Humanize yourself, but be stern. Not be a screaming teacher, because screaming doesn't get you anywhere at all. But be stern, set clear boundaries, clear expectations, be clear on what you're expecting of them at all times, what you're expecting of the work, what you're expecting, what the deadlines are. Don't set a deadline today and then in 2 days be like, oh, just kidding, I'll just give you another week, because then you're not setting clear expectations. What is it? Is it now, or is my teacher going to change tomorrow and she's going to give me 2 more weeks? So plan yourself ahead. Know when things need to happen. The more prepared you are and the more knowledgeable you look, the more they'll respect you. And respect is a thing that has to be earned. It's not something that you just set. So again, going back to the same things, creating those relationships with those students, knowing, what what their limitations are, knowing what real expectations look like with each of your kids. I think that's the best way to establish those expectations, because now you know for sure, okay, so I can't really ask her to give me, a 4-page essay because it's not in their capabilities. So what can I do? What's a realistic expectation? I can't really expect my kids, because I'm primary too, to just sit for 2 hours. So that's unrealistic. So break it up. Make it engaging. Engagement is key. As long as those kids are engaged, they're not going to act up. They're there. They're there with you. They're following your every word, your every lead. So always be prepared. If you feel the need to do a referral, do it. But don't give away your power. Your power is yours. Don't use, I'm going to call your parent. That's giving away your power. If you, every time the kid acts up, you call the parents to complain, or you call the principal to complain, you're giving away your power. So establishing those, specific needs. Okay, so now I need a higher power because this is escalating, or the behavior is a little bit much. So now I need to, intervene in a different way. Other than that, you just handle it yourself, and you let them know that you are the power that be. When they're in the classroom, you are the one in charge. It's not anyone else. They usually react pretty well to that because they know that you have their back too. So be there for them, establish that relationship, and also be firm in what your expectations are.
Really good preventative measures. Because you are a primary teacher and a lot of the people here are going to be primary teachers, I definitely want to ask you to expand a little bit more on if things have reached the point where you do have to dish out more of a punishment. So I know some of the things are like, do you have a timeout corner kind of thing? So for primary, what kind of punishments, or again, a calm down corner, a timeout corner, what kind of things do you implement for when it has reached the point where you don't want to contact the parents, you don't want to send them to the principal, but there needs to be a consequence? So what kind of consequences have you had to implement?
So it depends on the kid, really. I've done a few visual charts. Sometimes that works, and that's a behavior tool. And it goes with the nature of what I teach. Sometimes I do, if it's more of a, because I have higher classes too, for those kids, I'll just give, instead of punishment, I like to think of positive reinforcement is a better way to deal with behaviors. So we'll have, I don't know, if we can go through this and we can get this lesson done and we can do this, we'll get, extra time for recess, or we'll get, some free time on, we'll do a Kahoot or some sort of thing that they'll actually enjoy. I don't do a lot of punishment. I do a lot of close proximity. If I know that this student or that other student can be a bit of a handful at times, I will get them closer to me and just set them right next to me so that they know that I am literally watching at that time. Sometimes I do have to call parents, and that is okay. But I turn it more into a conversation where the students are involved as well. And I let them know that it's not just that they're in trouble, but that I care about them and what they're missing out. And that lies in more than just saying, well, he's not behaving well and he's not doing well. And if he doesn't do this, he's going to fail. Because fear does not bode well with most students. It's creating that relationship and knowing that you're working for them, towards them, that usually gets the better results. Depending on the school and depending on what the rules are, the code of conduct can come into play too. There have been difficult times though when a student has put his hands on other people. So that is, that is higher, right, higher hierarchy. So that's when you want to involve that principal. That's when you want to go and, really get that intervention from a higher power. But reminding, well, these are the expectations. You can't put your hands on people. You can't call people names. How would you feel? Flipping the tables. Sometimes I just have them talk to each other. And sometimes that's all it takes, because sometimes it's just a misunderstanding, and we often forget that we have to talk to each other to problem solve. So giving them those skills, providing for those skills. What do you do? Well, I'm going to model for you. Right. So can you let him know how you feel? Okay, so he's going to tell you now. So now you need to listen. So what do you think about how he feels? And kind of just going back and forth with their feelings. that's kind of what I do. I'm more of an intervention approach kind of teacher than a reprimand consequence type of teacher. There have to be classes. Sometimes they have to stay later and finish their work. Sometimes they can't participate in certain activities because they have to do whatever it is that they have to do. But being a punishment or giving punishment out all the time is not, I don't like it because it doesn't promote better behavior. It's probably what they get at home anyways, just the punishment and not really the tools to deal with what just happened.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, you totally answered my question. Okay, so secondary teacher, consequences you've had to implement, ways you guide the students in a better way, discipline issue. We definitely need to know how to deal with students who have gone too far. It's nice, again, it's nice to know how to guide students in the right direction, but we do have a lot of interns that have faced situations where it has gone too far and the teacher is obviously not in control of their classroom. So what kind of consequences, what kind of things have you had to implement, something that's been able to get you back in control of the classroom or an individual student who's acting out? So go for it.
Okay, so secondary is a little bit different than primary because I have the students for 50 minutes. So I don't get that as much one-on-one with them. Also, by the time they come to me, they do know the classroom rules. They've been taught those in primary. So when they come to me the first week of school, we go over what I expect in my classroom and how I expect them to behave. So they have clear set rules and guidelines and expectations. Then I make sure that they understand the expectations in the classroom, but I make sure that I am always very strict in the beginning, but I am fair across the board. So like she said, if you do something, you need to hold to that. You cannot say, oh, well, maybe no for this student, or, oh, maybe I'll change. No, if you set a rule, it's the rule across the board. My students have always told me that I have been strict, but I am also very fair to every single one of them. I treat them all the same. Things you can do, if there is somebody who's acting out, change their seat immediately, move them closer to you like she does in the primary classroom, move them away from somebody who was causing an issue. If the two of them are engaging in, not participating or talking or whatever the behavior is that you do not want to have happen, separate them. Make sure you're walking around that classroom. If you're walking around and interacting with them, gives them less chance to act out. For our school, we have a very strict policy as far as our steps and our procedures. So if you have a class that there is just a kid that's going crazy, usually for me, all I have to say is, so-and-so, see me after class. That takes care of the rest of them because all of them, now they don't want to stay after class. So when they are after class, we have behavior contracts set at our school. So there's a contract that they fill out, we fill out. And the second step on that contract is parent contact. So ours is an immediate, almost parent contact. They have the first time where I talk with them right after class. They tell me, first question I ask them is, why do you think I held you after class? So I hold them accountable for what they did during class. They have to tell me what they did and why they think they're staying after. And then I ask them, well, what do you think we can do to fix that problem? Now remember, I also have another 25 students who are heading in my door, so it is a very quick turnaround. And then after we do the behavior contract, then it goes, after that they get morning detention. And then after that, it goes to parent contact. And then there's a step-by-step, and every school has a step-by-step feature is what you're supposed to do. Just make sure you go in there and do not try to be their friends, especially at the secondary level. You need to go in and do establish yourself that you are the one who is in charge of the classroom, but it is also their classroom, but make sure that they understand that there's times when they can talk out and when there's times that they cannot, and to be respectful to everyone in the room, including their peers.
Awesome. I think that was all of the questions we were going to base the Zoom around. So if anyone else wants to ask any questions, hopefully we have about 10 minutes left before the Zoom call ends. So if you guys have anything you want to ask teachers who have been doing this for quite a while, then go for it.
All right, so I have a question. Mostly it goes both ways to primary and secondary, so it works. How do you deal with new like acronyms that come into play with each new year, like for different maybe procedures or maybe different testing that are coming in each new year, or maybe sometimes even new like paperwork, as Ms. Moncrief said, that secondary teachers have to constantly be filling and stuff like that. So maybe like, how can you like start memorizing those acronyms of which form is which, and then, or maybe like which test is which, and it's not a form but a test, and it's like, how can you start like learning about that?
Okay, we've constantly put the primary teacher on the spot, so let's let the secondary one. You got to think of an answer quick. Go for it.
As far as all the forms and everything, when at our school, and I'm sure it's the same at all the schools, we have new teacher meetings so that you will be attending new teacher meetings. I'm not even sure how many times they meet a month. So you will get a lot of information during there. Plus, at the beginning of school, you have several meetings that you meet with, and they say, okay, this is what we're doing this year, and this is how we're going to handle like discipline, and this is our new form for discipline. And you just familiarize yourself with what you can. There's a lot of surveys that we're asked to fill out. There's a lot of like, I have the FSA testing coming up. Every year, 6th grade does health screenings. So there's just a lot of things. You're always getting forms from guidance to fill out about a certain child. I would say as a first-year teacher, as soon as you get them, fill them out immediately. Because if you don't, guess what? It's now past the deadline, and it's like, oh darn, I remember I was supposed to fill that out. As soon as you see it, try to do it that day. And just as you're in the school, you will get familiarize yourself with all the different things that happen during the day. And then also, like I said, reach out to your COLs. They are great support. They are there. If you're like, I just don't understand what we're supposed to do, they will help you. They're always there for you. Where'd you go, Katie?
Y'all are self-governing individuals.
Okay.
Go for it.
I have a question. How many, I don't know if it's different for secondary and primary, but how many meetings would you figure are like a month, or like how many extra things? I mean, I understand you're doing work for your classroom on top of everything through the day, but like professional development meetings or meetings with your team, how many of those are happening with everything else?
All right, Tanya.
I think that depends, honestly. It changes with year to year. This, at least us, and it changes with school to school. We have a monthly meeting that we all do as a faculty all together. But we also have development that we do, like we just had Core Connections training, which is a writing curriculum that we use, or we had iReady training. So it depends on the programs that you're using. It depends on how new they are to your school. It depends on how many people need help. We do, aside from that, my team in itself meets every week a few different times a week during planning time, and we'll do planning for reading, and then we'll meet again the next day and we'll do planning for math, and then we'll do planning for social studies and science. So it really does depend on the school, on how you guys plan, on what the rules are towards that. There's also professional development that comes from the county and that you have to go to, especially me in that sense, because I do exceptional student education. So I have to go to peer training. I have to go to quality IEP. I have to go to all those things, but not everybody has to go. So it really just depends on how your school works for that, and how much professional development you want to go to, because you can also enroll yourself on those. So I think it varies from case to case. I would say that it's fair to say that you're going to at least have 2 meetings, and that's just with you, and it's with the people that you plan for. So just manage your time wisely.
I can actually give an answer to this too for my internship teacher from junior year. They would plan at the beginning of the year, the school and the county would give them the guidelines for the entire year. And then their PLC group, or whatever they called it, would meet for the start of the month and make the plan for the whole month. And they'd put it on a calendar and a doc, and they add resources for each other to share on there. And then they'd meet briefly every week to say, hey, this didn't quite get done. Can we like push it back a little bit, just to like compare where they're at during the week. So it's not too much. My teacher didn't feel. It's a lot more casual than you think it is. But a lot of the PD meetings and the stuff you're going to be required to go to professionally, that one would be a lot more struggle. But your PLC meetings, all those are a little bit more for your own benefits. So it's a lot more casual. But yes, what Tanya said, definitely my junior internship teacher agreed. She has no time to do anything at all. So try and manage your time. And then her other piece of advice she gave me was make sure you keep school and home separate, because it is going to be very, very difficult to separate that life once you get too deeply into it, because your first year, you're going to want to do everything perfect, and it's not going to work like that. Did anybody else have any other questions? Because we still got time.
Okay, so with exceptional ed, what has been some of the best strategies and practices that you found work with you and your students?
Well, that's an interesting one. I would say using a very hands-on approach and using, I feel like using whole brain teaching has helped a lot, because it requires them to respond not only orally but physically. They can associate movement with responses, and that usually helps, especially for those kids who require repetition to really set in those skills, putting stuff in their hands that they can touch and that they can make sense of, because making sense of abstract concepts like math, it's sometimes really hard for those kids that need to see it to understand it. Sometimes numbers are not enough. Sometimes they need to see the numbers. They need to move the numbers. They need to jump to the numbers. I do PE integration. So I do physical activities with math joined together. And that has seemed to create a bigger impact in their academic gains, at least in the math subject. During reading, we do everything very scaffolded and very dramatic. I really have, and my kids go from, like, I have kids that are working on a kindergarten level and kids that are working above grade level. Finding that common ground and making sure that they can feed off each other, creating those discussions and those moments where they can get the information from their peers and have their own conversations within the class. That has helped a lot. Doing repeated readings. When a kid doesn't quite get it, you read it 3 times. One, it's metacognition, right? One for the words, the other one for the meaning, and the third one for the understanding. And it sounds dumb and redundant, but once you put it into play, they get used to, okay, I can handle that part. My brain doesn't have to focus on the words anymore. Now let's put it all together. What does it mean? What are they trying to say? Okay, I get that now. That's great. And then that third one, okay, so what do you think they're trying to say when you put it all together? Kind of thinking chunking, right? Chunking of material, repeated readings, additional scaffolding. Those things are key, because one time is not going to be enough. And knowing that beforehand, being prepared, knowing which questions to ask to trigger the responses that you want or that you need from that student. And each student is going to give you a different result, and each student is going to give you a different response, but guess what? That's awesome. So be prepared for the unexpected, right? Think about 5 ways that a student can read the same text. Make it dramatic. Make it so that it sticks, right? Make it tangible for them. Make it relevant. Focus on connections, things that they can connect to in that text. How can they relate to it personally so that they can understand it better? How are they the same? How are they different than the kid in the story? I usually do a lot of stories that have social content because that helps too. It goes to the standard, but it also goes to who they are as people. And getting them to a different stage of thinking also helps that understanding and increases those academic gains.
Okay, well, we are reaching the end here, so I would love if you both could just say a nice closing that you would like to share with us, something to leave an impact, anything you want to share before we head out that you think is really important for us to know. So we're going to start with secondary, so go ahead.
Okay, first off, I think you are entering a wonderful profession. I have been doing it for years, and my oldest daughter is following in my footsteps, except she's not doing math, she's doing English. Just make sure you are always doing something different. Do not be afraid to try new things. Our school is very, very supportive. If you have an idea, speak up, because some of those teachers who have been there for years and years and years get into a rut and they do the same thing. So you coming in as brand new teachers with all of these wonderful ideas, don't be afraid to say, hey, can we do this? Can we try something new? And just be yourself. Remember that those little people out there are looking up to you. And it is a wonderful feeling when your students come back several years and say, you know what, you were a great teacher. Thank you for what you did. Or you were my best math teacher, or whatever. I mean, those little moments mean so much. And just don't be afraid to try new things.
Gonna get emotional. All right, Tanya.
I have to agree with her. Just be an innovator. Don't be afraid to think outside the box. Just remember that you guys are there to make a difference. That's what a teacher is someone who makes a difference. It's someone who makes an impact on someone's life. So this is not just a job. This is the job. This is the job that creates awesome humans. And these little people, these minds that you're shaping are going to be our future. So never lose track of that. Always remember that you're teaching these kids for jobs that haven't even been invented yet. So always teach them to think outside the box and strive for good relationships with them, because those relationships are going to get them to want to know you, to want to learn from you. The other day I was in, and I agree with your mom. The other day I was in my room and I had the week from hell, honestly. Everybody was all convoluted. It was a full moon, weather change, time change, the works. And this little girl came in with just flowers, just because. Just because. And a little note that said, you're the best teacher in the whole wide world ever. Those are the little things. Those are the things that let you know that even when things get tough, even because you'll have those tough days, they're coming, they're there. It's part of the job. What you're doing is important. What you're doing it's more than a job. It's shaping the world. You're shaping the world.
Thank you so much to both of you. This was a very productive meeting. So thank you guys for all our SFA members who joined in tonight. I know it's late, a little later for some of us. but we're here. We attended. So thank you again, guys. I hope you got something good out of this meeting that you can use in your future. I know Michelle was taking some very beautiful notes that I'm sure she's going to share with all of us. And we can post and put in the member drive. And this recording will be shared and you guys can watch it later. So thanks, guys. You can go ahead and log out. And thank you so much for our 2 teachers who joined in. Night, guys.
I love you, sweet.
Love you too.
Be
Mom.
safe and have fun. Bye.
Bye, guys. See you later.
Bye. Here we go.
Okay, I'm ending it now.